Dear cops of Reddit, have you ever made an arrest you felt bad for? I knew someone in school, I'll call him Steve, who got arrested for beating down his mother's boyfriend at the time. The guy was forcing Steve's mother onto heroin and made her sell for him at one point, and one day Steve walked into his mother's room to the guy choking her out for talking back at him. Steve kicked the living shit out of him, but his own mother called the police and pressed charges against her son because she was so afraid of her boyfriend. The officers that responded knew Steve's situation but had to follow the call. I spoke to him at length about this not too long ago, and he said that all the officers treated him with respect and were outwardly apologetic for having to arrest him. I think the charges were dropped, thankfully. Steve told me the last he heard of his mother's now ex-boyfriend is that someone burned his face with petrol and he's totally disfigured now. His mother is with another guy who's helping her start an antique shop apparently, so smiles all around. Not me, my mom. She was working Vice as an undercover prostitute. This lonely guy drove up to her corner. It was the poor guy's birthday and he didn't want to spend it alone. She kept trying to talk him out of it and told him to go home. The guy wouldn't take no for an answer. I did street outreach to prostitutes for 8 years. The undercover Vice women were the easiest to spot, although in fairness I had more of an eye for what the women looked like than most. That said, haircuts and general appearance, hygiene usually gave it away. So they were more likely to pick up men who were very green when it came to buying services. /r/Tales from the Squad Car has many good stories, but the one that hit me the most was People Are Assholes, about a cop arresting a man and woman and their 4-year-old kid who doesn't understand why. Hey, that's me. Thanks for linking that. I hope people get something out of that, and understand that cops frequently have to make difficult decisions. There are a few, two really stick in my mind. The first was an elderly female who I arrested for a warrant, passing bad checks. She had found her husband deceased lying on the living room floor. I logged her name for the report later and lo and behold up pops this felony warrant for passing a bad check a few years prior. She had zero contact with the law, so it was never taken care of. I tried to let her slide, but my sergeant made me hook her. I was brand new and still on probation, so I did what I was ordered to do. Worst transport up to the jail I've had in 8 years. What made it worse was how understanding she was. Second one wasn't an arrest, but a child custody placement. Call was originally a child custody agreement violation. Mother was refusing to hand her infant child over to the father. We get there and female is distraught, completely hysterical. Father shows us court-ordered custody papers for the child granting him full custody. Turns out father is a complete ass, abusive towards mother to include threatening her with a gun. He ends up leaving her for his young mistress. Well, he had been so controlling over the mother he never allowed her to work, so when he left she was basically destitute. Father can afford high-priced attorney and easily wins full custody as mother is representing herself. Having to physically remove the infant from the mother's arms and hand him over to the complete scumbag of a father really had me questioning my career choice for a long time. I have been in police work for over 20 years and most of that time was spent as a detective, sex crimes, narcotics and regional violent crime task force, so there were not too many I gotta do this arrest. But, back in the 90s I was a patrol officer and had a moment. Some woman drives about an hour into the big city so she could take her 14-year-old son's school clothes shopping. Mom gives the kid some space to pick out his clothes while she shops with the younger sibling. Well, the kid gets hungry and leaves the store with some clothes in his possession to go get something to eat from the food court. As this country-ass kid is walking back into the store with the clothes, the loss prevention stops him because he does not have a bag. The kid freely admits to leaving the store with unpaid merchandise. The mother demands to see a manager, and while we are waiting she asks me what happens. I tell her that if the manager wants to file charges there wasn't a lot I could do. But, I remind her that manager was the biggest fish in the smallest A.B. Clark pond, made up store name. I told her that if she was not happy with the answer to complain until she got up the food chain to someone who would help her. The manager showed up, was very understanding, and I cut him loose. On the back end of the story, the LP filed an internal affairs complaint against me for being unprofessional and demeaning her manager. So, the day I got my written reprimand, my district commander also gave me a glowy NG2-page letter written by the kid's mother about how wonderful I was and cared about her son as a person without just being a robot. Nothing like a pat on the back right when you are getting kicked in the nuts. My dad had to arrest an underage prostitute who had no family and was abused as a lot by the underworld. She went to a youth penitentiary of some sorts and he had control over her file and also was on the case to arrest the prostitute importers. We're from Belgium, we have a lot of East European pimp lords importing and abuse underage East European girls. After she was free, a couple of hours later she committed suicide. He told me she was an orphan and there are apparently orphanages in those countries that sell the girls for 2k to 3k euros. My dad is doing his job but I can tell he feels really terrible when he deals with stuff like these. It is especially difficult when he has a daughter about the same age of the underage prostitutes. It is a mad world. I worked in a group home. We had a gentleman who lived there who had a developmental disability and was very impulsive. On occasion he would leave the home and go down to the corner convenience store. He had no concept of money, so he would take a candy bar or a soda and leave without paying. The store knew us and would call us and we would walk down and pay. One day, the store got a new manager. This asshole decides that he is going to press charges against the guy. So he calls the police and has him arrested. They fingerprint him and everything. This guy has no idea what is going on and he now has a criminal record. The police felt terrible about it and were not shy with sharing that with me. My staff and I never walked into that store again. Edit. Many are asking how he could have gotten out. He is a human being who deserves the same amount of dignity as the rest of us do. We eventually had to put an alarm on the front door, but there was a process to go through to allow that, which we did go through. As is the instance of any social service agency, we were constantly understaffed, first because of funding and second because it is a very demanding job. If that bothers you, write your congressperson. Yes. Filing a report for a mother whose juvenile daughter had been raped, and the mother had warrants. Are you kidding me that you can be detained for calling someone a bitch? That's get up. Jesse Pinkman is not gonna be pleased. I was in court for a speeding ticket and there was a known mentally challenged man with hearing loss. He was cited for disturbing the peace or something like that. The poor guy is up there trying to tell the judge what happened and fight the ticket. He even has a friend/neighbor/family member there to explain that he can't control the volume of his voice because he is deaf. The deaf man is being very loud and moving around a lot and the judge eventually tells him basically that he needs to stay in his house all day instead of being out in public where people can hear him being loud. I think he got a disorderly conduct ticket too. I'm not a cop, but I worked loss prevention for about 7 years, so I had my share of arrests. Sometimes it's just kids making stupid choices, sometimes it's professionals who do it for a living, and sometimes it's people who don't see another way, usually because of their pride. Had this one lady, my first summer on the job. She comes in with a duffel bag, and the boss, the guy training me, he points at her and says to me, "She's gonna steal." No hesitation, he just knew. I was still pretty green, but I knew he knew his shit, so I watched her. I'm following her around the store, around corners, through the cracks of displays, hiding behind chip racks. Every trick I'd been shown. And wouldn't you know it? She was stealing all right. At one point she's on one side of a bread display. I'm on the other, but crouched down. She can't see me, but I can see her hands stuffing things into this duffel bag. Razor blades, soap, shampoo, towels, what have you. And I can see her infant child sitting on the shopping cart seat. And the kid? Well, the kid's looking right at me. He's too young to talk, but he sees me. The lady of course walks out, and we arrest her, bring her back to the office. Usually, people try to put up a bit of a front, maintain some dignity until at least they get into our office. She was barely keeping it together, sniffling, moaning. And when we started to read her rights, she starts bawling. Apologizing. Explaining. Begging for mercy. My boss said no. He'd taken hundreds of dollars worth of stuff, not just some bread and milk or something, for survival. Towels and shit. She says she's broke, but her kids wanted to go to the beach, and she had no beach stuff, towels, shorts, soap, all of which she had. Boss said no dice. I felt like a piece of shit. Because I know she's leaving in cuffs. So where's that leave her kid? Her options were bad. Have us call CPS, because somebody has to have the kid while she's getting taken downtown. Or call up the dad, from whom she was separated, who was fighting her for custody, to have him come pick up the infant child because she was caught stealing to try and support them. Pretty much a lose-lose option. She was probably gonna lose her kids. She wails. Apologizes. It doesn't get her anything. All we can do is tell the cops she was cooperative. The cops say she also has a history, and it's not looking good. Dad shows up, throwing daggers with his eyes at the lady. Takes the kid. The cops take the lady. All we have left is a bag of products she tried to steal, an empty office, and the silence. I know that she made her choices herself, and I didn't make her steal. I know those kids might be better off without her kind of bullshit. I know she'd get her day in court and get to talk to a judge. I also know I never got subpoenaed, so she probably didn't fight it. I arrested a lot of people after that. None of them made me as sad as that woman. What I remember most is her kid, looking right at me. That eye contact, that brief exchange of glances with an infant that would give shape to the memory of the whole event. I guess what makes me feel worse is knowing I'd do it again, have done it again, and it didn't make me feel bad anymore. I'm not a cop, but I did have a lady arrested and she got a lot of time for it. I felt bad for her child more than her. Here's the story. I'm a firefighter/paramedic. Department gets a medical call to unresponsive female with young child in the home. The complainant was anonymous and was gone by the time we get there. Upon arriving at the residence, the front door was wide open and a 3-year-old child was playing on the porch. I enter the home. My partner takes small child into the home in the kitchen. One person waited at the unit and another at the roadside for PD. I find the female passed out on the floor in the living room with a broken bottle of vodka next to her. The place smells like a brewery, so I proceed to speak loudly and tell her in there. Nothing. I call in my partner before I sternum rub. Passed out drunks can come up swinging along with drug users. He holds her right arm and I proceed with the sternum rub. Instantly she starts swearing and cussing. My partner moves and she sits up. The small child comes in and goes to her mom. She starts telling me that I'm a piece of shit for ducking up her high and now she's going to duck up my life, then spits in my face. I politely ask her not to do that again and ask how much she's had to drink. She tells me to duck off and if I would do this to my baby, spits on the child. What makes you think I won't infect you? She spits at my partner this time. About this time PD arrived and my unit radios me to come out. My partner stays to monitor the child and mother. Upon talking to PD he asks me for face shield and gown. I ask why. He tells me she's got Hep C and has threatened people before. WTF? Why did dispatch not notify us of this vital information? They let you know, why not us? I tell him what happened and what she said as well as what happened to the child. He puts on his PPE as well as his partner and the three of us go in. My partner sees the officers and turns green. He's new with young wife and child. I proceed to assess patient and determine she's just drunk and overdid it a whole lot. The police take her into custody after my partner and I fill out paperwork and file charges. The child is released to a grandparent and my partner and I spend the next hour scrubbing with distilled water and alcohol aside the engine. After a 9 months worth of tests and lab work, my partner and I continue to test negative. Our viral boosters have proven to work and showed no signs of infection. The child was sent to a grandparent's and the mother was sentenced up to 10 years in prison for threats against public safety. For both attempts on my partner and myself along with the child, and previous attempts on law enforcement. I feel bad for the child, but I'm also happy at the same time. She's now in a loving, caring environment without the constant threat of infection due to a mother with addiction issues. She should be with her mother, but not until she's clean and sober. We did receive a letter from her through the judge. She thanked us for helping her see what is most important in her life. That was her child. In these cases I'm often jaded to that type of remark, because I see so much backtracking. If she does get the problem fixed, it will surely be a good thing. I have a question. Do cops have a good reason for issuing DWIs for people who are sleeping in the passenger's seat of the car, or are otherwise showing reasonable doubt that they do not intend to drive? This has happened to a lot of people I know, and I've had to rely on sleeping in my car plenty of times after drinking. I put my keys inside the gas cap door that could only be opened from the inside, and prayed that it was enough to keep me out of trouble. I know the whole quota thing is more or less a myth, but what is the reasoning for DWIs in those conditions? Edit, Till. I'm not a cop, but when I got arrested for stealing alcohol I met a cop who had a great sense of humor and was possibly trying to lighten the mood. I don't know if he felt sorry for me or not, because I was obviously scared, but I really appreciated it, because I still laugh at it. I was handcuffed to a rail on the wall of this room, as I waited to be processed. He was just passing through and asked me and the guy being detained across from me what we did. He was also there for retail theft, but stole a bunch of jeans. When I told him I was there for stealing alcohol, he looked down at my shoes, which were a pair of beat-up Chucks, and said, "Man, you should have tried to steal a new pair of shoes, because those are dooked up." I couldn't help but laugh and the other guy did too, as the cop walked away. Edit, a couple of pronouns. I was on the receiving end of this arrest, but I know the officer felt bad about it because he said so. It was back in high school. 4 friends and I were out at night goofing off in our suburb when we decided to prank a girl we knew. She had been our friend until we found out that she was spreading nasty rumors about each of us, as well as some of our other friends. In my case, she had told the best friend of a girl that I had almost managed to make into my first girlfriend that all I wanted was a blowjob. I would have been happy for a girl to hold my hand, but whatever. So we went to her house and found a recycling bin full of newspapers, as well as an old sack lunch, and decided that it was all we needed. So we put the dry newspapers all over her car until it was nearly covered, and I put some apple slices that were left in the bag on her car as well. Thinking we got away with it, we scampered off into the night. Well, turns out we weren't so lucky. The girl had called the cops and wanted to press charges, so the next day at school my friends and I received the dark red office notes and went in to face the music. When I got to the office, they sent me back to the principal and he had a cop with him. The first thing the cop said to me was, "I really wish that I didn't have to do this because it is incredibly stupid, but I have to place you under arrest." Turns out I was guilty of criminal mischief 3. Thankfully my diversion counselor said that I just needed better things to do with my time. So I went and watched What the Bleep Do We Know, told him about it, and poof, it was gone from my record. Thanks for listening to another episode of Reddit X. Subscribe and activate the notification bell so you won't miss any stories. Feel free to share your own stories below in the comments. Have a good day.